What is up, Steeler fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Hangover. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me, as always, is Shannon White. Hey, Shannon, I know you didn't want to talk a lot about Aaron Rodgers because he wasn't a Steeler yet. Well, he's a Steeler now, so are we ready for this conversation?
Oh, I'm ready now. I mean, I didn't want to talk about it unless it was something worth talking about. And now it is. And as I always do, and we as Steeler fans have learned to do, you make the best of every situation. So we're going to take a positive outlook and of the possibilities of this signing and what can happen this year. So yeah, I'm more than ready now.
There you go. There you go. I'm excited, man. I think that I might be in the minority here, but because I've seen a lot of people just kind of not like the signing. I'm on the boat where, look, the Steelers, their future quarterback was never going to be on this year's roster. Their future quarterback is potentially going to be drafted next year. And so they need an answer for this year. Now, going back even to last year when they got Russell Wilson and they said that, goal is to sign an extension if he does well. That extension wasn't going to be 5 years,
No.
maybe 2. And so their plan, whether it was going to be Russell Wilson panning out last season or somebody just for this season, to me at least, especially with what they've done with the comp formula, I think they've always been targeting next year for that quarterback position. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's your most logical or most likely avenue. They're having to kind of, with the way things are going, they're having to come up with this on the fly, and figuring out what's the best way to get your next franchise guy. And I didn't want to talk about Rodgers, and me and you've spoken at length about it until there was something worth talking about. But now, taking a positive outlook on everything, I'm like you. I believe that it's a 1-year rental. They didn't break the bank to get him. It's reasonable. If he's willing to be a game manager who could get the ball out on time and accurately, something that the Steelers struggled with last year. Let's be honest. The games that they did get the ball out on time and accurately, they had some success, but it was few and far between. If he could do that, throw across the middle, which is something he's been willing to do in his career, then, I believe that they have a chance to have a better offense. I think there's more talent there. So I think it's a great opportunity for Rudolph to come in, and I'm confident with him as the backup or the starter, to be honest. If, because the chances of Rodgers staying healthy is going to depend on the offensive line, let's be honest. And I think it's a good opportunity for Will Howard because, one, he'll get to learn without being thrust out there too early, good Lord willing. So, and if he has the opportunity to develop into a above average game manager with better than average athleticism, then he'll have a chance to do that, going on to next year's team as well. So I think it's a better situation than what we were looking at last week.
I agree. I think that, and I mean, you and I have talked about it before the show, and I have to agree with you. I think that the quarterback room this year looks a lot better than what it did last year. I like Aaron Rodgers. I like Mason Rudolph. I think that if he has to get into the game, what we saw in the end of 2023, that he can be a guy that can carry the team for a couple of games if need be. Back when Ben Roethlisberger was a quarterback, he took a lot of days off. He took Wednesdays, sometimes Thursdays off. Do you see Aaron Rodgers doing the same?
I think it would probably be prudent at 41 years old. I guess it'll kind of depend on Aaron and what he thinks and the coaches. If he had a really rough week the week before, say he took a lot of hits, needed a little extra recovery time, yeah, I think they'd feel more than comfortable letting Rudolph get them reps and Howard. Because, again, all these quarterbacks, all three played kind of similar. So you don't have to make adjustments. Like last year, you had Fields, who played entirely different than Wilson. And then you had Kyle Allen, who was basically your emergency 3. This year, I think you got 3 quarterbacks that, you would like to see get some reps. And they actually can all play the same offense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. And I think that was one of the things that Mr. Rooney had mentioned, that he wanted to make sure that there was not a complete change of the game plan if something were to happen
Yep.
with quarterbacks. And 100%, I think that that's exactly what they did. You know, he signs Aaron Rodgers, that is, signs right after voluntary OTAs are over, just in time for mandatory minicamp. Do you think Mike Tomlin and the Steelers knew that this was coming for a while now? Do you think there was that secret handshake deal or wink of an eye when they met back about a month and a half ago?
I believe that there was that was the expected plan. Yes, I think that they kind of agreed on this behind the scenes. It didn't make me happy. It didn't make a lot of the fans happy, and a lot of the fans were like myself. We were just tired of talking about it. I mean, I'm fine with it, but I won't talk about it until there's something to talk about. And now there is. So now we will definitely talk about it and talk about the possibilities this year and what they might add to this equation before the start of camp. And um, I believe they have last year they knew coming in you had two quarterbacks that didn't like to throw in the middle. You had one that with questionable decision making, processing, getting the ball out quick enough. And you had another one who liked to hold the ball and pull the trigger more down the field. And this offense, the way Arthur Smith wants to run it, as you've seen in like the Cincinnati game where they had the offensive explosion, the ball, whether it's play action or it's just a regular drop back, the ball comes out quick. And there's a lot of throws to where you get the ball out, you make an accurate throw, lead the guy where, put it where it needs to be, and then it's up to the playmakers to make plays. And I think Rodgers is much more equipped, and Rudolph, than either Wilson or Fields were last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think Rodgers still has it with the arm, and then last year his offensive line was probably worse than anything that the Steelers are going to have, hopefully, this year. And so he had to get the ball out fairly quick. I think his average time to throw was like 2.65 seconds, one of the quickest releases in the game last year. And it was a lot had to do with the front line that he had and what he was working with. I expect the Steelers offensive line to be better than that. I expect the Steelers offensive line to give him adequate amount of time. I've heard nothing but good things about the movement between Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu on the outside as the tackles. That Broderick lost some weight, so he's moving a lot better, closer to what he was moving when he came out of college. And Fautanu is just a gifted man out there on the right tackle on the right side, just able to move back and forth. So I fully expect the running game, especially now that you have the running back fit for the scheme, the running game, the offensive line to do a whole lot better. And thus I think that this should give Aaron Rodgers a better showing, maybe even more comfortableness in the pocket. I think it's a good thing that he signed now and he's there at mandatory minicamp so that the offensive line can learn him. Where does he like to stand? How much time does he want? Those type of things, and get that chemistry built between them. I know we've mentioned it before, if we try to look at it in hindsight, did OTAs matter? And we both said that they probably didn't, but going in there for the mandatory aspect now, and it sounds like he's been working with DK Metcalf a lot. He was at Cam Hayward's charity golf thing with DK. Both Aaron Rodgers and DK were together. It sounds like he's putting in the work, and he's putting in the work with the guys that he needs to put the work with. And I'm just extremely happy that he's going to be there for minicamp. What are you expecting to hear tomorrow? He's supposed to talk. You expect to hear anything about anything? What kind of questions are you hoping they are asked?
Well, I hope it's really less is more. I think he'll get grilled a lot about why did he wait this long and was he waiting on a better offer? There's going to be a lot of questions, but he could just say, yeah, we kind of had this, as you say, a secret handshake agreement, or we come to realize that this is when I need to be here, and I'm here, and now we're moving forward. And all the positives coming out of camp, the people that you hear talked about the most on offense has been Darnell Washington and Roman Wilson. And we know that Rodgers likes to utilize the tight end down the seam, something the quarterback hasn't done around here since Ben. And he likes Roman Wilson, who is kind of like a young Randall Cobb. So I could see those two men benefiting greatly from Rodgers coming in. And you know that Rodgers will want to feed Metcalf because the number one wide receiver in an Arthur Smith offense always feast. And, one of the things that keeps sticking out to me is to have a true wide receiver one. And when I say that, I'm talking about everything involved, including effort. The interception where Metcalf run down Buda Baker against Arizona, where he hit like 23 something miles an hour, and Buda Baker couldn't believe he run him down. But that's an effort you'd have never seen out of Pickens. Yeah. He would have been back throwing a fit, stomping up and down. Oh, he threw an interception. There's a difference, gentlemen, in Metcalf, who's he might have some issues too, a little bit fiery and some different things, but that's a man, that's a warrior. He'll go out there and he's a warrior every game, and you're not going to be questioning effort. And I don't expect to see the crocodile tears and the tantrums. And I'm hoping that he can develop a strong rapport with Rodgers and can be what I think he can be in this offense, especially now with, Rodgers throwing him the ball.
Yeah. I'm curious. The first time that you see Aaron Rodgers in uniform, how do you think that moment's going to be for you? Is it going to be like weird to see him in a Steelers uniform? Is it going to be nostalgic? Are you going to overcome with joy? What do you think that feeling is going to be, seeing somebody who's been a part of the game for quite some time now and, is now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is a prolific person on his own and now is a member of the Steelers? What do you think it'll be?
Well, for me, it's going to depend on how he acclimates into the franchise, into the culture. If I see, there's certain things I look for. If I see Steeler type behavior, and that team first mentality, wanting to win and wanting to do what's necessary to win. Because like I said, this team, I believe, will prosper best if he is a game manager, facilitator, and, brings that level of confidence to his teammates that, hey, I've been here, done that, I'll get this done. You just do your job and I'll get you the ball. If he can bring that, they haven't had that level of experience or confidence in a quarterback since Big Ben. If they can get that back, and again, like I said, I think it's going to be invaluable to have Rudolph, who not only has experience, but another set of eyes, and a guy you can count on. And both of them are going to be valuable to Will Howard. And so, again, I really like where they're at with the quarterback room.
Yeah, I do too. For me, I think it's going to be a little weird seeing him out there in the black and gold, but as long as he starts slinging the ball in the right direction and the Steelers start winning, it'll be a lot better for me to see him in the black and gold than anything else. Jay's Upper Teeth comes in with a $2 super chat saying Washington was open down the seam a lot, never got the ball. I think that has a lot to do with the quarterbacks not willing to throw the ball to the center of the field. I think that with Aaron Rodgers, we're going to see a difference, 100%, and that being one of them. Pittsburgh Toddy says, is it possible that both the NFL and Vegas knew about Rodgers' deal beforehand? Steelers play the NFC North, probably ratings Bonzanas, and I'm reading that wrong. As someone said earlier, the Vegas line didn't move. It kind of did move, though. Like, I think they were 80-1 when the season ended last year to win the Super Bowl. Then they were 45-1 right before Rodgers signed, but I think Vegas and everybody kind of knew. And since he signed, I think they're 40-1. What do you think about the move or the lack thereof from Vegas? And does that say anything about the confidence of Rodgers to the Steelers from the betting side?
I think they have the same concerns and realistic concerns that any of us do, in that, how much can you count on a 41-year-old quarterback?
Yeah.
I mean, there's Tom Brady and then there's everybody else. Some guys can do that and play, but again, we think of Tom Brady and his insane workouts, his diet, the stuff he did, and the amount of money he invested to stay in playing condition into his mid 40s is just unheard of, and the longevity he had. But he played the game above the neck, just as the guy like Peyton Manning did. As long as they had health, relative health, they could still function on the field because they were just 2 steps ahead of everybody else. And Ben got smarter as he got older and was able to play above the neck football because his arm wasn't what it once was after the injury. I think Rodgers' arm is in a pretty good condition. To me, it's from what I've seen when I watched him some last year. He can still throw the ball. He still tries to do things that he can't do anymore. And if the pressure starts getting to him, he turtles up. He goes down. Because, I guess just not wanting to take the big hit, trying self-preservation. So it's really going to be vital that the offensive line keeps him clean and that they get the ball out quick and don't put him in those situations very often. But, I do think that it's going to come down to if the Steelers, what they ask of him is realistic, then how far they could go. It could be a Cinderella story, kind of a lightning in a bottle, 1-year thing, and they have a lot of success. Because like we talked about, the questions it's going to be answered. Is Tomlin the one that's been holding the offense back, or is it the coordinators and quarterbacks? We're going to see a little bit more of that this year to get some answers. Is the defense, are they really wearing down late in the year and they're not as good as we think they are? Or will they show they'll be fresher and better with a better offense out there? There's questions that's going to be answered this year, one way or the other, I think, depending on the amount of success Rodgers has.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And, this team, though, with the offensive struggles that they've had, I mean, they've had some seasons where they've averaged less than 20 points a game offensively.
Yeah.
And yet they still were either in the playoffs or had a winning record. And I think a lot of that has to do with the quarterback play the last few years. I think a lot of the, offense's downfalls as far as maybe the lack of trust from Tomlin was a lack of trust in the quarterback. And, I think with Aaron Rodgers, he commands some respect and things of that nature. So I think we're going to see the offense at least opened up a little bit more. He's not completely alien to this offense. Arthur Smith was with Matt LaFleur at one point in their career. And so there's a lot of the same terminology, a lot of the same type of offensive concepts and things of that nature that he's already been accustomed to a certain extent. I'm excited. I think he's going to do all right, man. I think if the Steelers can, they've had some years where they only averaged 20, 21 points a game, still won 10 games. This year's schedule, it's not as tough as last year's schedule. I think with an Aaron Rodgers there, DK Metcalf, I think he's better than George Pickens just based on the effort and stuff like that. I think George maybe has a higher potential, but I struggle to see George reaching that potential with his attitude. And so, with that being said, I think overall Metcalf's a better player for the team. I strongly suspect they're going to get a number 2. Aaron didn't charge, or he's not getting paid quite a bit. I think it's $13 million guaranteed. I know it's $10 million guaranteed, but once he plays week 1, another $3 million is guaranteed. So it's really $13 million guaranteed, can get up to 20 with incentives I think Pro Bowl and Super Bowl and things like that are achieved.
Mhm.
But a guy like him taking a discount or like that, for instance, to me it tells me that if he's coming in and he's saying, all right, I'm going to play for this amount of money, that probably means that he's expecting, if there's a player available because he's taking less money, that he's expecting the team to go out there and get it and to make some moves, like that wide receiver number 2 position. I think last year we were waiting for that hammer to drop on the wide receiver 2 or 1, whether it was Ayuk or Kirk or whoever was rumored to have been that guy. I think if they had Aaron Rodgers on a deal that they have like this, even though they were paying Russ a lot less, Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers are paying. He's not getting I don't believe he's getting a check from anybody else. So, 13 million. I think that means that the Steelers probably going to make some moves. What do you think?
I think they will if the opportunity's correct. It was right. I mean, they have 12 picks next year, I think, or something like that. So, I think they would give up a second or a third to try to get the right guy in. But again, we know that Khan won't give away the farm. He won't chase it too hard. I mean, unless it's the right situation. So I would like to see them bring in somebody that they all are comfortable with. Aaron would be comfortable with. That's a good fit for this offense. But, they might go another route. They might be wanting to use, have more faith in Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin and Darnell Washington, the guys that were underutilized or wasn't available last year in Roman Wilson's case.
Yeah.
Because I think that, Rodgers might want one of his guys. And he's done it everywhere he's been. There's been Rodgers guys. So, I don't know if there's anybody they would consider trying to bring in. Again, Keenan Allen's out there. The wide receiver 2 doesn't get a ton of targets, but usually it's third down or goal line, and you need somebody reliable there. So I could see something like that. I think that'd be a good matchup of a veteran presence with Rodgers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possibilities now. Of course, we had 2 free agents hit today on the defensive side of the ball in Jaheir Alexander from Green Bay and Jermaine Pratt, the middle linebacker from Cincinnati Bengals. The funny thing is last year the Bengals signed Pratt to an extension. He was a free agent, and the Steelers got Patrick Queen. I wanted Pratt. I wrote an article that Pratt was my number 1 target, not Queen, because I didn't think Queen could be the green dot, which he did not do good as a green dot, and I didn't think he was the right fit for the Steelers. I wanted the more physical, powerful run stuffer. The guy brought that presence. And, I said all along that I'd get past Queen being a former Baltimore Raven when I seen him in the black and gold. But his play never got to the point that I could forget that he was a Raven. Because my concern was playing next to Roquan Smith, it let Queen just freelance, and he didn't have to think much. He was always in attack mode. Well, when they put the green dot on him, he wasn't the same player. So it's funny that the guy that I wanted last year, and to them to try to sign, Jermaine Pratt, come open. Now he's available out there. So I just thought that was humorous. I had to bring that up. But
yeah.
No, I think that the wide receiver 2, if the right opportunity arises, I think that Khan will pull the trigger.
I hope so. I think that he's got a quarterback on a really cheap deal. The quarterback room is on a cheap deal, to be honest with you. And, it's got some tackles out there on some expensive, least expensive deals as well. They're on rookie deals, so they're not being paid a tremendous amount. Much of the offensive line, honestly, is on a rookie deal, except for Sayumalu. So you really have you should have quite a bit of money to play with. I know TJ Watt is somebody that's still there. We talked a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit about some of the free agents that just became available. We'll talk a little bit about them here in a second. Let's take our break real quick. Guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a few words from our sponsors. If you're listening to this live, we'll be back in about 2 seconds. Yeah, we're back. Welcome back, guys, to the Hangover. I'm Daniel, alongside with me, Shannon White, as always. Before we get back into the content, I want to remind you guys of our website, stillcurrentnetwork.com, your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers news and coverage. When we're done here, go check it out. You can go look at the audio-only podcast where you'll find mine, State of the Steelers. Comes out every Saturday at about 11 o'clock a.m. So go check it out while you have a chance, or when you have a chance. So back to the conversation here. I know you mentioned, some possible free agents there. The Steelers have talked, though, about some trading partners with they've contacted the Miami Dolphins about Jonnu Smith. They've contacted the Falcons apparently about Kyle Pitts. What does that say about the tight end room to you, that they're trying to target these pass catching tight ends? Does that show a little bit of lack of confidence in Darnell Washington to you?
Well, talking about the guys that, Pitts and Jonnu Smith, to me, it would be more of a concern about Pat Freiermuth than Darnell Washington, because Darnell Washington has great value as a blocker regardless.
Yeah.
He's almost like having an extra tackle at times. But they have not utilized him. And I think he didn't feel the need to be in that top condition for full quickness and to be able to get the puppies up and down and get down the field. But I think now he realizes he was going to take his conditioning to the next level. And I think we're seeing that, because they said he looked excellent at OTAs. I'm excited to see him in the preseason and training camp, because there's a guy that I think he could increase 15, 20 catches this year based on what he did last year. Mm-hmm. And especially with the quarterback willing to throw down the seam and across the middle. And Washington is a nightmare for a normal size cornerback to tackle, or for most linebackers to try to cover, because he's good. He's fast for a man his size. No, I think they're talking to about the possibility of getting a Pitts or a Jonnu Smith, just from the aspect of having another weapon. We talk about the wide receiver too, which is really underutilized in Arthur Smith's offense. So if they get another weapon, regardless if it's another tight end, matter of fact, you can use Kyle Pitts like a wide receiver too, because he plays almost as much as like a wide receiver than he does a tight end, because he's not much of a blocker. So you can line him up out wide and use him like that. So. I just think they're right now they're looking for weapons, and I like the weapons this year. When you consider last year they had Pickens and Warren on occasion, but who else was explosive? Calvin Austin, if you get him the ball. But now you got Metcalf, Johnson. We know he can hit a homer.
Yeah,
he can hit a long run, and you've got Roman Wilson, hopefully. You got Darnell Washington. So I think they're just looking for more explosiveness.
Yeah, you're probably right. Arthur Smith has used a lot of tight ends in his previous offenses. Even with the Steelers, there's been a healthy rotation of the tight ends to a fault at some points. I think there's been a lot of times where a lot of us have questioned why Cam Hayward was out there instead of a Pat Freiermuth on certain plays and stuff like that. And so, bringing in one of those guys kind of just tells me that that there's a possibility of the Steelers looking at multiple passing tight end sets. And maybe perhaps they're going to be doing what we were hoping they would do, maybe even last year with some of the bigger guys that they had, put them all out there. And if the defense runs out heavy, spread them out, throw the ball. If they go out there light, bring them in close and run the ball down their throat. And so maybe that's something that they're leaning towards. Now, before the break, you mentioned a couple of players who may be or who are available now. One of them, Jair Alexander, cornerback, two-time Pro Bowler, first-round draft pick in 2018 for the Green Bay Packers. It's only 28 years old. You know, he's a speedy guy. Ran a 4.38 in the combine back in 2018. You know, so he's up there in speed. You know, last year the Steelers ended up going out there and getting Dante Jackson because he was a speed guy. They lose him in free agency. You know, what do you think the likelihood of an Alexander coming to Pittsburgh is, and where do you see him fitting on the defense?
Well, are people talking? Well, he won't be cornerback one for the Steelers, and I'm like, you know, he's more accomplished than Porter is. Porter hasn't made the Pro Bowl yet, and Porter, I like Porter, and I consider him cornerback one material. But if you bring Alexander, that would just give you two strong starters. If somebody said, "What about Slay?" Well, what about Slay? What, Slay's 35, whatever.
34. Yeah.
I mean, you know, he's not a long-term answer, and he could easily be in that rotation as a third corner, slot corner, whatever. That doesn't keep you from picking up a guy like Alexander. Now, you know, I think Alexander, part of the problem is money, and he
Money and health.
and that the Green Bay didn't want to give him. So I don't know how much it would cost, but you figure it'd be pretty high. And I don't know if the Steelers were interested in offering him that. And of course, right now, as you say, you've got Porter going into year 3. So, you know, but he was a second round pick, we've got to remember. So you're going to have to start thinking about what kind of contract offer you want to offer him pretty soon.
That's true. And go ahead.
But I mean, like, if you're going all in for this year, then you might consider bringing in a guy like Alexander.
See, I think you would bring in an Alexander, obviously, because Slay's not an answer long term. He's only a Pittsburgh Steeler for 1 year. He's 34, going on 35. The problem is he's got a fully guaranteed $10 million contract. You know, I don't see the Steelers benching a guy with a fully guaranteed $10 million contract this year. You know, I think Mason Rudolph mentioned it in one of his interviews that paycheck matters. You know, what somebody's getting paid sometimes matters. And so I can see them being an issue where, like, all right, well, we already paid this guy. Maybe perhaps if they were aware that this was going to happen, maybe they wouldn't have pulled the trigger so quickly on Darius Slay. But, you know, Slay did good last year. He played most of the games. Alexander's been hurt. He played 7 games last year and 7 games the year before. The year before that, he had 16. And the year before that, he had 4 games. And so he's only had 1 full season in the last 4 years. And the rest of them have been less than half of the season. And so I think that's a concern. But with that being said, you might get him at a cheap deal for a year, you know, because of that, you know, a prove it type of situation. And if he's going to go out there and think maybe, hey, you know, what better defense that I can prove it on than a defense that has a lot of pressure coming up the middle, you know, in the quarterback's face, like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Herbig, you know, that's going to force the quarterback to maybe make some decisions quickly and inaccurately. And he could benefit from those. And so it'd be interesting if he ends up becoming a Steeler. If he ends up, you know, the Steelers go out there and acquire him, I for sure think that Slay is demoted down to cornerback 3.
Oh, I think so. Yes. And, you know, again, it's what are the Steelers willing to give up to go all in if they really believe that Rodgers could be that answer this year? Yeah, I'd rather see, you know, let's go for it. But they got some young guys on cheaper contracts, but let's go with guys who are young enough that can grow with the team. I mean, you want those veterans like obviously Rodgers, Slay. You know what I'm saying? But you get a guy like Alexander, if he can reverse his tendencies of injury, then you might have a guy that could be around for 2 or 3 years as you're shooting for a title. You know, get a guy like Pitts. Pitts is incredibly young still. He's been in the league like 4 years, I think, but I think he's still like under 25. So, you know, you sometimes you can get a guy like that, get a steal, and somebody young enough to grow with the organization. So, yeah, I wouldn't overpay for that wide receiver too, but you know, getting the right guy. Now, if it's a second round pick to trade for a guy like Romeo Dobbs for Green Bay, just throwing a name out there. Somebody might become available that could grow alongside Metcalf. Hey, I'm all for that because whoever the quarterback's going to need, he's going to need weapons.
Yeah, 100%. You're absolutely right there. One trade that has been reported, and I want to get your thoughts on it. It's on oh God, what's his name? McLaurin from the Washington Commanders. The trade proposal was put out there that the Steelers should give out their 2026 first round pick and then do a day 3 swap for McLaurin. I don't think you want to give up a first round pick for a wide receiver like that. That's not for me. You know, I think that would be a mistake, especially if you're trying to aim for a quarterback early in next year's draft. I really don't think you would give up the first round pick for a wide receiver. Now, maybe a 2/3. You know, I'd be cool with that. You know, something like that for McLaurin. You're gonna have to pay him as well. But you know, yeah, I wouldn't give up a first round. What do you think about the trade proposal for a first round pick for McLaurin, and what would you give up for him?
No, I absolutely agree with you. The answer is no. He's almost 30. Again, we're going back to what I was talking about, the age. Somebody who could grow with the organization, and I like McLaurin a lot. I really do, but not for a first rounder. As you say, the Steelers, it's not a secret that they're really looking to maybe trade up and go for that franchise possibility quarterback next year. And you need that first round pick because it's going to cost you more than one. And so, no, that's what I'm saying. I'd be willing to give up a second round pick and maybe another round to try to get a guy like that, McLaurin. But no first rounder. That's too high. Not for a wide receiver. Not right now.
Yeah, and he will be 30 this season.
Yep.
I would opt the old Antonio Brown, you know, trade value, 3rd and a 5th, Mr. 3rd and a 5th, and you know, maybe you'd have me very much interested in that trade. You know, but it's got to be reasonable. It's got to make sense. You know, he's disgruntled out there because he's not getting paid, so you know that you're going to have to pay him. And yeah. I mean, the only good thing is if you do get a quarterback in next year's draft, you know that the quarterback room isn't going to be an expensive one for a few years. You know, you can handle that weight for a little bit. And then by the time you have to, you know, their career is up because he's 30. So, you know, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, and, you know, that quarterback is looking at that 5th year option, you know, things of that nature. If he's doing well, then you probably have to reevaluate that situation. But,
well, if you could do it. Okay, let's look at the Bengals. Like they released Jermaine Pratt because they're trying to get Trey Hendrickson under contract.
Correct.
Because they got so much money now in Burrows and in Chase and in Higgins. And, you know, when they drafted Chase to team with Burrows, and they skipped on the offensive tackle. I can't remember who it was that year. Might have been Sewell who went to the Lions. That's crazy. You know, you're putting the cart before the horse. Well, they made it work, and they made it to the Super Bowl, but they didn't win. Well, now the money issues are hitting. So you got that window, But the window closes when you got to pay the guys. The contracts come due. And what people are not thinking is if the Steelers do trade to move up next year to get a franchise quarterback, you're going to have to give up your number one, more than one. And so you say, well, the quarterback will be on a cheap deal. Yes. But how are you going to fill the holes in your roster? You're going to have to sign free agents. So there you're going to need more money.
Mm-hmm.
So that money you're saving in the quarterback, you're going to be putting in other positions. How are you going to keep the guys you got to help the quarterback? When they cut free agents, you're going to have to pay them too. So if you've got a team talented enough to be a contender, you're going to have a lot of money in other positions besides quarterback. And as you say, then when you get to year 3, year 4, and he looks like a franchise guy, then you got to totally reevaluate. But, just because you got the quarterback who's a possible franchise guy as a rookie, you still got to have the money to fill the rest of the roster. Because you're not going to have those draft picks anymore that you're going to be giving up. And the teams that can balance that are the teams that become real contenders and win Super Bowls. And, nobody's done it better in recent memory than Kansas City. But again, they had their franchise guy and they paid him early, but it worked out. Tampa Bay would really be in a bad spot right now, but they got Baker Mayfield handed to them. That doesn't always happen. Tom Brady wins you the Super Bowl and he leaves. Retires. And then you get a guy that was the number one pick in the whole draft, and his team turned his back on him, and nobody else was smart enough to realize he goes to Tampa, and now Tampa's got a good team. I think they're going to be good again this year. So, again, it takes a little luck and good fortune, but the Steelers are going to need that money that they're not paying the franchise quarterback to make this a championship roster.
True. John says a smart quarterback will work his contract for more Super Bowl chances like Mahomes.
Amen. Yes.
I agree, but to a certain extent, I think the quarterback that has other opportunities to make money outside of football definitely will. Mahomes has State Farm. He has all these, avenues of income that he can do those type of things. Like, for instance, Ben Roethlisberger had that issue in his career where he didn't have very many sponsors and stuff anymore. And so he was one of the highest paid quarterbacks while he was a Steeler up until the end of his career, where I think the last year it was, a really low offer. But outside of that, he was up there percentage wise of the cap and in correlation with all the other quarterbacks that were getting paid. So, Mahomes, he has that ability because he has that extra streamline of income. But football's short. I'm not against anybody getting their money. They earned it. They deserve it. They put their bodies on the line every day, even in practice and things of that nature. Anything can happen. I mean, look at what happened to Farham. He tore his Achilles tendon just doing OTAs and regular, football in shorts and shirts. So, your career could end suddenly and so much stuff can happen. But in the end, I think that with the Steelers, with what they're doing now is, like, if they were to go and pay for a wide receiver, right? If they were to go get a McLaurin, let's just say they give up a third and a fifth and they trade for him, and now they have to pay him because he's disgruntled where he's at. Mm-hmm. If the Steelers draft their guy next year, by the time that they have to pay him, you're hoping the hope is that you can build a team around him to elevate his play. But by the time you have to pay him, you're hoping that his play can now elevate the other players around him. Because a lot of these receivers, like if they were to sign McLaurin today, he'll be 34 by the time 35 that the Steelers go and get a draft pick next year. He's probably not going to be in the league when they have to pay him again, or when that player or when that quarterback needs to get paid. So you're hoping at that point maybe you can go draft some receivers, some young talent that your now franchise quarterback can now elevate that player. Now it's easier said than done, obviously, but I think that's the goal. You know what I'm saying? And so,
well, Well, I don't think you see too many teams with two $30 million wide receivers, even if they have a rookie quarterback.
That's true.
Just, most teams will have you have your Justin Jefferson, let's say in Minnesota, and you got Addison. You got, the Bengals are an oddity because they're trying to keep that big three together, in hopes that they can score enough points to make up for, what money they are not investing in the defense. And, we'll see. We'll see if that works. The proof will be in the pudding in the next 2-3 years. Are they contenders? They may get to another Super Bowl. If not, it was exciting, I'm sure, an exciting offense and fun to watch for the fans, but, I don't think it's going to win them anything.
Mm-mm. Yeah, neither do I. So when do you think TJ Watt's deal is going to get inked? Do you think that's happening this year?
I mean, I think it almost has to. I don't think he's going to play for $28 million. Everybody said, well, let him play it out. I don't think he will. Not now. Does that mean that he would take a reasonable deal at his age and not try to match or exceed Garrett?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that. Again, this is a really a tough situation because I know Watt cares more about playing football than he does any of this other stuff. He went in on his last contract and said, just get it done. He took over and said, I want this over with. I want to play. And I think now we're at the point, though, he's at a point in his career that he realizes this is his last big contract. And it ain't about the money. It's about the respect. And he wants to feel like that he's respected for what he's brought to the organization. And I don't blame him. The problem is none of the guys in the last 8 years have really brought anything to the organization as far as adding to the Steeler legacy. Because the Steeler legacy is the Lombardis. It's winning championships. It's being the best organization in sports, in my opinion. These guys have not added to their playoff record. They've not added to the mystique and the lore and the legend. I think it's not his fault, and he wants to be a part of that. But is he willing to do it for maybe less than he might get somewhere else? He might get a little more somewhere else. They might trade him, and some team will be like, well, we'll give you $40 million and $1 more than what Garrett's getting, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But is he going to win a championship there either? See, he has the legacy of Pittsburgh, and I hope it's more important to him than any of this other stuff.
I do too. I think it'll get done. The $40 million a year aspect of it, to a certain extent, I don't see how they're going to get around not paying him that much. But I think they understand that. I think with Aaron Rodgers' deal being as low as it is, that gives them an opportunity to sign him. I think the concern is going to be the longevity. How many years does he want to play? How many years does he want guaranteed? Mm-hmm. He's 1 year left on his contract. So, the likelihood is they're going to rip this 1 year up and sign him a new contract with new numbers for this year. And let's just say it's $40 million for this year. I can see them being okay paying that this year, maybe next year. But at 31, 32, 33, I don't know. I mean, he's 30 this year, right? So,
yeah.
It's a dreadful number for the NFL, football players once they hit 30. Things don't go as planned like they used to, so to speak. And so, hopefully he stays healthy and things of that nature. But I think at the end of the day, I think the Steelers struggle with this contract might be the longevity aspect of it. Where would you feel comfortable if you were in Omar Khan's shoes and, there was no way around getting around the fact that you have to pay him? How many years would you be comfortable paying him?
Again, I don't want to insult him with a ridiculous offer, based on what other people are getting paid. But there's got to be a certain amount of guaranteed money in there, which scares me with older players. I liked Hayward's contract. I really did. I thought Hayward's contract was a win for both sides. It was reasonable. Now, what that would look like for what, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't go past 3 years. I'd be way more comfortable with 2 years. But again, what that's really going to come down to what and the Steelers front office sitting down and what feels respectable to him. What do they need to offer him to make him feel respected and valued within the organization? Because you're going to need a healthy and happy TJ Watt, properly motivated to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And I don't want to see him go nowhere. I'm just looking at this realistically, and I just don't see if he's really worried about what Garrett got paid. Don't worry about Garrett. Garrett isn't, but let's be honest, Garrett won a playoff game against who he beat. I mean, that's awful. I mean, it's just the truth, though.
Yeah.
But Garrett ain't winning anything in Cleveland. But, again, there it's definitely more about the money. Well, hopefully for what it's about more than the money.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think he understands that the Steelers aren't a team that are going to follow suit in what the Cleveland Browns are doing. They're not going to say, all right, that's the team we want to follow in what they do. I don't think the Browns are that team. Jimmy K comes on the $5 super chat, says, I got to ask, what number is that number 8 jersey, Pickett or Maddox? Please pay TJ market value. By the way, he's worth it 3 years. Carlos Waitman. I'm just kidding. It's not a Carlos Waitman jersey. I actually do have a Carlos Waitman jersey. It's actually a game-worn jersey. When I went to Pittsburgh one time, we bought one of those. We went out to this mall that was like maybe an hour away, and they had a Pittsburgh Steelers shop in there. And in there, they had something called like these mystery jerseys, and they were mystery jerseys that were game worn. And I was like, obviously they're not going to be anybody great because that would bring in a lot of money and they would sell them. So it's going to be somebody we probably don't even know. But me and my wife, we decided to buy one each. I got Carlos Waitman, and she got Christmas. Can't remember his first name. Big dude, number 93. He was on the practice squad for a while. But yeah, no, this one is actually a Kenny Pickett jersey identifying as an Aaron Rodgers jersey until my Aaron Rodgers jersey comes in.
Put just some tape across the name and then write Rodgers on there.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing, guys. That's what I'm doing. All righty. Well, Shannon, do you have any final words for everybody before we call this one a show?
Well, I'm sure everybody feels the same way that we do. We're just happy that it's over. We know what to expect now. I'm anxious to see what happens in minicamp, and just to see everybody's attitude, excitement, enthusiasm for the upcoming season. And I do believe that now they have a more clear vision of what they really want to try to do between now and training camp. So, and we just hope, again, no injuries. These mandatory mini camps and walkthroughs and everything, it's great, but you just don't want any, out of nowhere terrible injuries, which can happen, as we know. So, but best of luck, and I'm ready to get behind Rodgers and root for our Steelers.
Yes, man. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I almost called you ma'am. You got me too excited there. No, I'm ready too, man. I'm excited. I'm gonna look forward to that interview with Aaron Rodgers tomorrow. I'm gonna look forward to the clips of him in a Steelers uniform or practice uniform, throwing the ball around, and perhaps targeting a new Steeler in DK Metcalf and getting a chance to see him in Steeler helmet and practice gear. Well, I hope you guys have a safe week. We'll be back on tomorrow night with a Big Brosco show. You don't want to miss it. Like, comment, subscribe. Shannon, take us out, my man.